Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back on League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys. It's global power rankings time. 20 to 1 is what we're talking about. And this is where it starts getting to the nitty gritty because we're going into playoffs and you can climb a lot more when you have best of series. It's the last week that we're talking. I know LPL and LCK always have best of threes, but best of fives in head to head against squads, ahead of you in the standings. That's how you climb, baby. That's how you climb.
Hey, that's how you get some shuffling going on in the power rankings. Just a handful, just a sliver of teams making their argument, making their cases, making the climb up due to their performance, their actual on-rift efforts. A couple of them sliding, swapping places due to a couple of big disappointments this week as we get into the main juicy part of the power rankings.
And we always start with who's new and who's old news, who's out of the list. Out of the list, the drop has continued for DRX. The 5-game losing streak we talked about. Again, they fall, which means they're out of here. I could have hung them on. The loss to Gen G, okay, you can stay on. But losing to Live Sandbox in heartbreaking fashion in Game 3, I can't keep you on.
Yeah, this is a situation that for a lot of people to need to realize that this is not DRX being ousted from this list for the rest of the year. I think that is something that's going to be very important. This is a DRX squad that I expect to remain in the waters just below the power rankings for a little bit and find, maybe try to find their form, find the better results is how we're going to find them back into this list. They are certainly a team that can warrant it.
Stop flipping Barons. Stop it.
But yeah, we need to have that type of discussion about some of their choices that they're making in game. And as you can see with the result against Live Sandbox, the execution, it was also not there and necessary this week to hold on to your spot in the power rankings.
So with their slide, Mad Lions, the upset against Rogue, they come back into the top 20. It's hard, maybe you could put them as high as 18 ahead of these squads like GAM eSports and PSG Talon. But I mean, PSG, we talked about last week, just how dominant they've been, not just within their region, but worldwide. GAM had another 2-0 this week. So we put Mad Lions just below those guys.
Yeah. Mad Lions punching in a pretty hefty ticket with the takedown of Rogue in the playoff series, and especially in the fashion that they did that and some of the aspects that were the positives for them, what you'd like to see. Still, I agree. I want to hold them back, just waiting for that next little tick of points in the playoffs for the Mad Lions. Get that next achievement, take down a squad like G2. You better believe that you'd be leapfrogging these guys at the bottom of the power rankings.
TSM beating EG, you're not coming in the top 20, boys. 100 Thieves, 3-0 on Ignitas, you're not coming in the top 20. C9 and TL are in the top 20. They didn't play last weekend, so they are staying put.
Yeah, nothing to take away from these two so far. And I think even when we get to the eventual matchup, right, between these two on the weekend, if it plays out the way that we are expecting, and it should be as close as we are expecting, I still see both of these squads holding on to a spot in the top 20. But of course, the victor will get that nice little boost up because, again, even if it is a North American team, squad like Team Liquid C9, worthy of helping your spot in the power rankings.
Yeah, I think whoever wins that series will deserve to go up some spots, especially because the LPL playoffs will have started by then, and you'll see some of the teams losing. So, C9 or TOL definitely got a chance next week to climb up some spots. Then we have this middling tier. IG stays put, fine. They did enough. Okay, we'll see when playoffs roll around for them. But then you have this trio of Rare Atom, Hanwha Life, and Rogue, where you can all say a disappointing week for them. You have Rare Atom. They went head-to-head against some of the big boys. They face now RNG and EDG. Didn't go so well for them. Didn't match up there. Hanwha obviously got smashed by T1. And Rogue, we gave a lot of praise for Mad Lions. We should give it for them, for beating them. But Rogue definitely did not impress. So all three of these teams are taking down a peg this week.
And especially when you talk about not impressing for Rogue, it's something to factor in how high they were up in our list, right? What type of territory they were pushing into and what you were hoping, for them to next achieve, right? That next level, moving up. It's the opposite direction is the level of performance that we got pretty much from everybody on Rogue this past weekend. Have to knock them down quite considerably. Hanwha Life, as we talked earlier on in this week, got quite a beat down from Faker and the rest of the T1 squad and in their gear up for playoffs, and certainly not the type of performance that leaves you with confidence heading into those playoffs for what a squad like Hanwha Life can do, because absolutely that is the test. It's not going to be about anyone below or behind making any type of case. It is about the T1s. It's about the Gen Gs. It's about the damn ones. Is that who you need to keep up with as Hanwha Life? And unfortunately, this, most recent, example that we got on the Rift, that's not passing the test.
And, for Hanwha, they're blessed that they still finished in that top 3 seed where they'll have the easier matchup against Nongshim to kick off the playoffs. I think you and I both fully expect that they should be beating Nongshim. If they lose there, I'm not going to call it a disaster, but a very disappointing end to spring. And then they're likely going to be matched up against Damwon. So if you're getting smashed by T1, I don't know what's going to happen against Damwon.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we haven't seen Hanwha Life and specifically Chovy, right, rise to the occasion against a squad
They've had
like
competitive
Damwon.
games against Damwon.
Absolutely, but if you're asking us to grade the power and expectations for them, given this past week, you can't help but slide down. And then the last one to touch on is, of course, Rare Atom, as you said it, facing off really against the very best in the LPL. So expected that they would end up with this record this past week, but certainly a squad that you might have wanted to see maybe a little bit more of a pushback, a bit more of a fight against these top teams, as that Rare Atom is going to have to eventually in these LPL playoffs.
And now you look at the bottom 4 teams, the first round of LPL playoffs. We have LNG as the 10 seed, who are, if we're going beyond the top 20, I could throw them 21, 22. They're just outside. Sure, you can hang them out there with the TSMs of the world. Yes, the 10th best team in the LPL. We're talking about TSM in the same conversation.
Hey, that's the LPL, baby. You better get ready for it, and you better get used to it before we eventually roll up to Iceland for MSI, or else it's going to be a rude awakening for the rest.
But we have 14-15 Rare Atom IG. That's your first round matchup. So it's going to be close.
Hey, LPL playoffs is all bangers, guaranteed.
And then the last squad here on the list, and the other 4th team or first round team in the LPL playoffs, is Suning, and they beat BLG and eStar 2-0 fashion, both of them pretty dominant. But again, the main reason they're climbing is because of those 3 teams they leapfrog over kind of having rough weeks. And Suning, they look good. They had nothing wrong. They look like clearly the best bottom 4 team in China.
Right. At the very least for Suning, and especially, as you said, getting this climb up is, yes, partly the slides that we've been talking about. But yes, certainly part of it is on their own merit, on what they've been able to do, their record and the results, what this Suning team represents at the bottom of the LPL playoffs and what they can do. For me, they're the team that I have the most confidence in that first part of the LPL playoffs, to do something, to try and continue to not only do something in that first round, but to then continue that momentum, to continue that growth into the next series. And then after that, that's what I've seen so far from Suning, compared to a squad like an LNG, who, as you said, do hang around in those muddy waters, kind of in that 20 to 30 zone, hanging out with Hooney and the TSM boys at the pool.
If there is going to be a dark horse in these playoffs, I think it's Suning making a deep run. And by deep, I mean, you could go as high as top 4. You could see them go.
And again, we talked about this before. This is not something new for the LPL playoffs. Every time that we type up these LPL playoffs and all the teams that are waiting to destroy your season, there always has been somebody from that first round of the playoffs make that climb through and generate some hype and get the upsets rolling. A squad like Suning, I wouldn't consider anything in the first round an upset. But after that, you better believe that they would be the underdogs, given the caliber that is remaining in the LPL playoffs.
Yeah, there's just a lot of insane talent, as we've talked about countless times in China. Now we get into that top 10, we can see some of this direct competition to Suning, and just finished praising them. One of the reasons why is because they're pretty damn close to the teams that are in the next round of those LPL playoffs. We're talking about World Elite and FPX, who we both did move down a peg this week. But Suning is not that far behind from WE and FPX. WE, much like Rare Atom, had some head-to-heads against the big boys, the top esports of the world this weekend. Didn't go super well.
This is FPX and WE looking in the the rear view mirror, and they're like, oh man, they're not assuming back, they're pretty far behind. We're okay. And then they read the thing that says objects may be closer than they have here in the mirror, and they're like, oh my goodness, Suning is actually right behind us. That's how they're feeling about this type of situation, and where you should understand where they are in the power rankings. I think for a squad like FPX, they have, I want to say, stop the bleeding. I want to be careful because I think they are maybe leaked still, but they have absolutely somewhat stabilized to some degree, and that's going to be
beat up on BLG in big fashion. I'm not going to get too excited about that, but at least they did that.
Right, and at least to see them stabilize to some type of degree is important heading towards playoffs, and knowing what type of matchups you can have and how those can go. Being stable like that in this late week in the season is very vital for a squad like FPX that's gone through the ups and downs and everything that we've seen that's happened with the organization. For WE, another team that I think needs to take that next step for me, right? We've talked about them a lot of times this year and what they've been able to do and what their expectations are and exceeding above expectations. Well, for me now, those expectations need to be set into this type of territory, right? Now that we're in this territory, I'm hoping you do better. I'm hoping you get to that next step. And for WE, it really is, the answer is going to be in playoffs, whether you can prove and take that next step.
And the big thing with FPX is you had Tien playing against BLG, which was a surprise to me. He looked fine. He wasn't an issue whatsoever. I mean, they were stomping so hard. I feel like perhaps a lot of people could have been jungling at that point. But it's interesting to see what they're going to be doing come playoffs with that jungle spot, because it ain't going to be Bo.
No, it's not going to be Bo. And as you said, Tien was back in, and the important thing to know, this wasn't, an emergency substitution or, someone say, this was about Tien saying, I'm ready to come back in. I'm ready to, take a starting spot in one of these matches. Worked out more than okay, and absolutely something to keep an eye on moving forward. If Tien can get back into form, can get back into his confidence with this team, that is another extremely dangerous weapon for another extremely dangerous LPL squad.
Yeah, which, again, will just make the playoffs more insane. I think everyone is rooting for Tien because of all the outside issues that he's had to deal with and being thrown into this situation now. We'd all love to see him bounce back and have a fantastic playoff run. The big move of the week comes in that 7 spot, and they've hopped ahead of Gen G. Yes, we're talking about T1, the big climb, 4 spots this week. They smashed their way into the top 10. We talked about, listen, we already had them ahead of Hanwha coming into that matchup. And if, depending on how they did that, obviously they were going to climb. I think they passed that test. And now, much like we put them ahead of Hanwha before they matched up against them, they have that 2-0 somewhat recently against Gen G. And assuming that they meet in the second round, I think most people are taking T1 as the favorites.
What a time, my man. We had just on Monday talking about Reckless playing Seraphine and what he was able to do on it. Faker says one more. Here we go. Let's get a little bit extra crazy on the Seraphine with the job that he was doing. The rest of T1 on the weekend, you can't help but put them into this type of spot and vault them over the Gen G boys. And as you said, from what we have seen recently from a Gen G squad, and yes, this is a Gen G that we challenged to be better and then went out and beat Damwon was better, but still not enough, my man, because of what this momentum has been for T1, what they've been able to do, how they've been able to play, how they've been able to win, and what they are winning across the map. It's everything. It's everything, my man, and they are the squad that is on fire heading towards the LCK playoffs.
Yeah, 5 wins in a row is the most in the LCK. I'm not quite ready to throw them in that top 5 just yet, because the top 5 is still incredibly stacked, and even just ahead of them, JDG they played their last game before we did this last power rankings. They finished 12-4, so they're locked in that 6th spot for now. But T1, they could win spring. Obviously, Damwon are still going to be the favorites, but after them, you're talking T1.
And it's wild to think
that's a turnaround.
This is a KT roster, a level of roller coaster that the T1 organization and rosters have been on this split to get to this point. I think it's very important to touch on what you said about not enough to get into that number 5, top 5 type of territory for T1. I think it's more than okay to have T1 in this spot, right, ahead of a Gen G, you can have this type of discussion, whether you'd have Gen G ahead, you can make those arguments. Those are all more than okay to me. But if you start putting T1 into that top 5 type of territory just yet, without having, some of these playoff series or victories, a chance to push you up more, it's not enough for me at this point. They need to do a little bit more, or had done a little bit more earlier in the season to try and finish in that spot. Because to me, what the top teams in this top 5 have done, you can't be ousting them just off of T1, what they did this past week.
Yeah, you still have to remember how 6 weeks of the season went for T1 in the spring split. I'm just ready to make a full roster of Seraphine mains. You got Reckless Bot, Faker comes in mid. Maybe next week we get to see Wonder play at top lane, really start fleshing this thing out.
Okay, maybe we wait for Yuumi to get into the meta as well. Throw another one on top of it.
Yuumi Seraphine bot lane? When's that coming in?
Yuumi Seraphine bot lane. Thank God that's not around with Gore Drinker in his busted state.
Throw Olaf in the jungle, and it's literally guaranteed pentas you're going to get.
I don't like that. I don't like that. No more, please. No more.
Could be a fun time in playoffs. But JDG is still ahead of T1, and they're looking like 2020 spring, 2020 summer JDG. That's about it.
And the crazy thing, right, when we've talked about JDG in the past, and you've heard us get all excited, usually and almost always, it's been zoom in the top side. My man, we got another The Shy. He's taken over. That's not been the story in recent parts for this squad. And again, I want to put some praise on someone, Yagao. Yagao has been the guy to step up big time this split for this team. And yes, this hasn't been maybe as overall positive as JDG would have expected or hoped for, given the changes they made to start the year. But what they have performed and what they've executed on to this point of the season, you got to be giving them props. And for specifically me, I'm going with Yagao.
He has the added benefit. He almost always gets whatever pick he wants mid lane, whether it's a comfort pick, usually one of the 3 or 4 meta picks, because you can't ban those. You can't ban out Yagao because you have to throw 3 bans at Zoom every game.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You can't, because you're focusing on that. And then the other thing that I think is important to mention, as we had talked about with JDG, the additions they made in summer, I'm pretty sure we're seeing a different level of aggression and competency really from Yagao. And part of that has to be practicing and scrimming against someone like Xie, right? That has to be somewhere you look at a level that Yagao could increase himself at. And that's what we have seen from him performance-wise this split.
Subs paying dividends, even if they're not being the starters so far. The top 5 is a little bit similar to what we got last week. And initially, okay, people might say G2, after struggling against Schalke, maybe they don't deserve to be in the top 5. I don't think anyone's going to argue that was G2 playing at their highest level against Schalke. I think, round 1 of playoffs, kind of easing into things. G2's like, Schalke, okay, they only had a good final week. I don't think they took this series as seriously as they maybe needed to.
Right. I think that brings up the interesting question of how much is that actually on G2, and do they need to be held responsible for that? And how much is it you can kind of, shrug it off, right? In the situation of seeing these type of performances, missed smites, multiple missed ones.
Take out the tilde key, Yankos. Just throw it away.
An important one to have, but not at those moments, my man, especially not in the jungle role. Can't be having that. So that is something that I think does warrant discussion when you're talking about G2 and people thinking about them possibly being ousted from this role. But then again, the example of why they're here, just look at what Reckless was able to do throughout the entirety of the series, what type of bans he is drawing, that type of attention for the team and everything else. It's still the same G2 that you got to be scared of. I think more than, yes, some sloppiness and some bad performances is part of this past weekend, but also it just is recognizing and giving some props to Schalke stepping up and delivering that series for us.
I still feel like we haven't seen the full ceiling of this new G2 roster, hoping it comes through later on in these playoffs. The top 4, I will say, has maybe separated a bit from G2. They're kind of reaching, can't quite get there, because EDG, Top Esports both had fantastic weekends.
Yeah, if anything, though, this past weekend really has solidified. Till MSI, I don't know if G2 is going to be able to find a way to climb into that
No.
top three, given what we have seen from these teams and knowing that really, at least for the LPL ones, we're going to get to see some head-to-heads eventually
And
as we get through those playoffs.
Viper is not only the best AD carry in the LPL, he's the best AD carry in the world right now. That's it.
And so let me tell you something. We're going to get a world where we get to see Viper possibly go tested like Jackie Love or Gala before he even has to talk about playing against someone like Reckless internationally. The LPL playoffs is just different, my man.
And top esports, you mentioned Jackie Love. He had a kind of bad Jinx game and bounced back with a dominant Jinx performance. So Jackie Love's still got a little bit of that IG in him. And the top two, RNG and Damwon, both still doing enough to stay put. RNG, the last game against LGD, when you've already locked up first, they still 2-0'd them. It wasn't super clean, but can you really get that hyped up for a match like that?
Nah, not exactly. When I'm thinking about these ones, I'm just thinking back when we were talking in the old days about Damwon and FPX towards the top of the table and saying, man, we're going to get this Khan and Nuggery matchup. It's going to be great.
I don't think
now
that's happening.
Xiao was saying, I don't care, man. I saw you here last year in the LPL. I could have played you in the top lane. Now I'm going to do it. I am playing the top lane. It is going to be an awesome time at MSI. I can't wait.
I'll take Xiaohu versus Khan. That sounds like a fun time in the top lane as well. But, RNG, I feel like Damwon, you're more confident getting to MSI than RNG is. And that's not a knock on RNG. That's a praise on top esports, EDG, and JDG.
Really is a praise to the overall strength and kind of the fear that you have of the LPL and the elite squads and the LPL and what they're able to do. Yes, the expectation is still, as much as I'm the T1 fanboy here. I want to be hyped. I'm not Headhunter X, but I want to be hyped about T1 going to MSI. I can't get to that point and that level yet. There's still a couple steps ahead of them, and on one of those steps ahead of them, waiting for that plane ticket, is Showmaker and the Damwon boys looking to punch that one.
If you're looking at Damwon, they're probably excited seeing T1 rolling coming into these playoffs because they feel like they haven't been tested in a full year now almost.
And this is a Damwon squad that loves to be tested. They've talked about it. They want to be challenged. They want to be pushed into these hard situations. A squad like T1 right now is looking like your best bet to get that, but at the same time, you better be careful what you wish for because, big time Faker Seraphines coming for you hot and fast.
I know the Riot scriptwriters are hard at work here for MSI, figuring out, okay, EDG wins, here's our storylines, top esports wins, RNG wins. I'll tell you what, either one of them, the storylines are fantastic. Any LPL team that are from the top four, Damwon, of course, even T1 if they come through the miracle run. Yeah, like Riot doesn't want Faker at MSI.
Let's just hope that they're not pulling from last year's NA pile for the scripts for whoever gets to represent us. We don't want that 0-6 TSM script. No, thank you.
Just remember, guys, because of 2020, defending MSI champs are G2. It feels like a long time ago that we were talking about that tournament, but that's the last time we actually had an MSI event, which is why this one is so exciting. That's it today, though, for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys. Thanks for hanging. We'll catch you on the flippity flip.